Google recently released an update where in some niches, they're giving more preference to sites with more authority and where the authors have more authority and expertise. For example, if you're in the medical or wellness niche, you're probably going to rank better if you're a doctor. That can be really tough to compete with if you're not a doctor. When you're in the early days of your website, it can feel like nobody's coming, nobody's reading your content. It's like writing to a ghost town. It's like you're in Silver City, Idaho, and there's nobody around but you. How are you supposed to compete with that kind of authority if you're not a doctor? How are you supposed to compete with a financial advisor in a financial niche if you're not a financial advisor with certifications and credentials? That can feel so overwhelming. But we have the answers right here, and it's actually a lot simpler than you think.
We need some experience, authority, and trust. Google uses the acronym EAT, EAT. We need to build that on our websites, especially if you're in a really sensitive niche like you mentioned in the intro. But really in a lot more things, I think this is just a direction that Google is going. If you're writing about a pets niche, if it's about the health of the niche, I can see that they would give preference to a veterinarian's type of content there. But you're not that. And we want to show you some ways that you can easily do it. Probably the most simple way to get authority, to get that EAT on your website, even if you aren't that person already, is to just chat up the expert. So there are a million different ways that you could do this, but let's say I wanted to write a post on the ATV laws in all 50 states. I want to do, what are the laws about ATVs in Idaho, Utah, everywhere? That's going to take forever researching laws and trying to do everything. And what do I know about ATV laws in Illinois? It's going to be hard to get that right. But what if I just spent like an hour and I just found the email address for one ATV shop in all 50 states? And then I wrote an email and I just said, hey, I'd like to write an article on my site, and I'd like to give you a link as the expert about Illinois ATVs. And I just found all the companies that sell it, and I just send them a questionnaire. Do you have to have a helmet on? Do you have to register your ATV? Where can you go ride? That kind of thing. Just have a sample questionnaire, and then you just, bam, BCC everybody and send out the email, and you could get amazing content for an article like that, do it very quickly, and now you can have somebody that is authoritative. You write your article and say, hey, I consulted with somebody who knows more about ATVs in this state than probably anybody else, and this is what they gave me on how to legally ride ATVs where you are. Borrow authority.
That's right. Another great example is, let's say that you want to get into a niche of a certain pet, but maybe it's a pet you don't actually know a lot about. Maybe you've never owned the pet. How are you supposed to have authority in that? And how are you supposed to write with authority, which is an important part? Well, you can start by chatting up the expert. When my wife and I wanted to go get pet fish, it was kind of a like, let's go get fish today kind of thing. We're at the store, we see fish tanks, and we're like, hey, why don't we do that? And then we thought, there'll be a better selection of fish and tanks and everything if we just go to a pet store. So we go to the pet store, and we're like, all right, person that works at the pet store in the fish department, what do we need to do? What do we need to know so that we can set up a fish tank and not kill all of our fish? Well, have you set up the tank at all? No. Pretend we don't know anything, because we don't. So he says, yeah, go get your tank. Here's all the things you need to do. And then you need to wait a week. Why do we need to wait a week? Well, because, and he explains what it's going to do to the water and all the chemicals you put into it and how it's going to dechlorinate it and make it magical for fish to live in. But we didn't know that. We would have just put fish in the tank and killed them all. We got so much information in about 20 minutes by chatting up the expert. And when we went home, we knew exactly what to do to set up our tank, and we successfully had fish for many months before any of them died. Now, we didn't use this to make a website, but the same process applies. Go to somebody who's an expert in the niche and just learn everything you can learn that a beginner needs to know about that niche from the expert so that you can write with more authority.
Yeah, and this is, critical if we're talking about any kind of medical information especially.
Yeah.
Let's say you're making a parenting website and you'd like to write, can kids take ibuprofen or something like that for a blog post. Well, Google's going to be really careful who they trust a topic like this to. And you say, but I'm not a pediatrician, I can't do it, I give up. But if you just go to the expert, you can have all the authority that Google is asking us to get. The best people, this is my favorite tip for getting authority, the best people for this are people who have written books, because people who have written books love to talk about themselves and really want to publicize their book. And so can you imagine if you had your hit list of articles and you say, okay, these ones are flagged as kind of medical content, and so I'm going to go find a pediatrician who's written a book about raising kids, and I'm going to send them a questionnaire on these. And then in every article, it starts right out of the gate, make it super clear, like this is the information that a pediatrician gave, and I emailed it to them to get their approval afterward, like this is quality information from a pediatrician, and you're really just summarizing, just bringing together that information. So don't roll over and cry every time there's a Google update that makes us seem like, oh, I can never catch up. We just have to figure out how we're going to provide better information to our users, our readers of our sites. It makes Google happy, it makes our users happy, and it makes your content harder to beat by the next blog.
Absolutely. So you've asked the expert, you've got great expert advice. Now what you can do is go join a community. Now we talked about this in our last video as part of this series, so go watch that video for great detail. But you can get fantastic expert content from practitioners in whatever your niche is by just going and joining a Facebook group or a Reddit forum and getting information, posting polls, getting whatever expert information you can from other people who have expertise in your niche.
Yeah, it's so much easier to work this way by joining communities, borrowing expertise, than just going to earn it yourself. I mean, yeah, you could go speak at a couple conferences in your industry, and usually that's not as hard as you think. But just by being in part of the industry, you're going to know more and understand more to provide better information. But one of the best ways to give perceived authority on your website, and sometimes that perceived authority is better than actual authority, is by working on the design of your site. I think this is really important. When you go to a website that feels like a cheap, cruddy site, it looks bad, the design feels dated, it feels like the images are really homemade and just not, like authentic is good, but not cruddy at the same time. It just immediately makes you mistrust the information that you're getting. You know, if I'm Googling what medication to give my daughter who's sick, and I go to some random looking cruddy website, I'm scared about the content, even though I really shouldn't. That's the design that I'm looking at. But people do judge blogs by their cover. And so get a good design. We're working on a redesign right now of our niche websites. You can go to Dirt Bike Planet right now and check out kind of the new design that we're rolling out slowly across all of our sites. We want them to look clean, professional, and easy to navigate.
One thing about design of a website, pick a good theme, stick with it, don't go crazy on it, but also in the first little bit when you're writing your very first articles, don't worry about design yet. It's going to be so much easier to figure out how your website should look after you have some articles and some images on your website. Before that, it's kind of tough to see how it's actually going to look. When you're writing your first 10 articles or so, there's nobody coming to your website. It's okay. By the time you get to about 10 or 15 articles, there's enough content. Go fix up the design and then write the rest of your content. Get the design just right during the ghost town period of your website, and it will make a big difference. Thanks for joining us on this three-part series about Thanks for joining us in this three-part series about the ghost town phase of your website. We have dedicated years and a lot of effort to learning the best methods. There's like this bee flying right on my head. We've dedicated years to learning the best ways to what? Just go to incomeschool.com.
Well,